Welcome back to Beyond the Signal, the show where mid-market security teams come for the survival tips that they actually need. I'm Katie McDonald, and today's episode is called Live, Laugh, Lock It Down, because honestly, if you're defending a mid-sized financial institution from global cyber threats with a local bank budget, humor might be your last line of defense. Joining me is Jon Densmore, CISO of First Mutual Holding Company, who somehow manages to keep multiple banks secure, 6 boards happy, and cyber criminals crying into their keyboards, all without losing his mind. We're talking about how mid-market banks can stay out of breach headlines, why attackers are coming for the little guys, and what it takes to do more with basically less of everything. So grab your coffee, block your calendar, and let's get into it. Jon, thank you for being here. To start, can you give us a quick intro to First Mutual Holding Company? What do you guys do, and what makes FMHC unique in the financial services space?
Sure. First Mutual Holding Company is a holding company of mutual banks, almost evident in the title. But basically, a mutual bank, just for those who aren't aware, is similar to a savings and loan in that it is owned by depositors, not a publicly traded bank. So it's owned by the local community, and the depositors are really the equivalent of shareholders in the bank. They have proxy voting rights, and they are directly involved in it. And that allows a mutual bank to be really invested in the local community. They give back to the local community, and all the funds that are invested in the bank, the deposits, go back to the community in loans and other matters. We're different than a credit union in that we are under the same banking regulations as all the banks. We have different products we're offering regulated differently, and we're also taxed, unlike a credit union. But we have a lot of the local hometown feel that a savings loan or credit union would have. So within the holding company, there are 5 mutual banks centered in Ohio, Virginia, West Virginia, and Kentucky. So basically in your greater Ohio Valley area is where we're focused right now. And these banks range in size from a couple billion down to several hundred million, staff size from anywhere to 300 to 400 down to like 5 employees. So the smallest banks are very small. What the holding company is able to do for all of these mutual banks is we can provide services for them such as IT, information security, marketing, HR, all sorts of things that really help them that they would be, in a lot of cases, very hard to provide for themselves. So probably the easiest way to think of it is that we are a fully faceted managed service provider, much more than IT, other services as well, to all these mutual banks, which allow them to focus on the services they need to provide for their customers and not to worry about such things.
So as a CISO, you've got a really big job, especially with you being the CISO of multiple companies. What does your day-to-day look like managing for all of these different companies?
Well, fortunately, a lot of it is, we're able to standardize on a lot of things. Within the footprint of the holding company, within the IT services, since those at the holding company level, we are standardized on the solutions we provide to all of the affiliated banks. In the case of Gradient, Gradient is able to help us protect all of those banks at the same time because they all go through a common network in a common data center. So for myself, a lot of it is managing the expectations of the different affiliates. I report to 6 different boards, which means I have 6 versions of different reports I have to provide for them on either a quarterly or annual basis, and sometimes monthly basis that we provide to these different affiliate banks, just to keep them informed of what's being done for them, both at the holding company level, but also what's unique to their banking situation. Within my area of responsibility and information security, we obviously provide everything you expect to provide, from email security to perimeter security to employee training to compliance and risk. All of that falls within our umbrella. So we do all we can to certainly keep the CEOs of these affiliated banks engaged in the process. We have a monthly security update meeting that all the CEOs are invited to, just to find out what's going on, what to expect down the road, what's going on with regulation, any various attacks we're seeing, as well as any audits we have coming up.
In all reality, mid-market financial services companies don't have the same cybersecurity budgets as big banks do, but you're still dealing with the same threats. Yeah. What is the biggest cybersecurity challenge that you guys are facing right now?
Usually the biggest challenge we have, like I said, you're correct in facing the same sort of threats, but we also have the benefit often of having a smaller non-international footprint, which gives us an advantage. So we can do things like a lot of geo-blocking on perimeter. We don't have any customers or business in Europe, so we don't really have to worry about traffic from Europe, as an example. That does give us a bit of advantage. We also can react a bit more quickly, but our biggest challenges is often just dealing with the rate of change of things. You can hardly have a podcast without mentioning AI. We're looking at that right now, and we have a committee for that. We have charter for that. We're looking into it, but we're not going to be developing our own AI tools or anything. We're going to be buying things off the shelf. Like most people, our biggest challenge has to do with employee security around email, particularly. That's usually the most common threat vector, as well as around attack and perimeter. Fortunately, we are fairly distributed. So like our data processing is not hosted within our network environment. That's hosted by our core processors. So even if our headquarters were to become a smoking crater, our customers would still have access to all of their funds, online banking and stuff, because we don't host that here.
With financial services, regulations play a huge role. You find that they help security, or do they sometimes add a lot more hoops that you have to jump through?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's to both.
Yeah. I mentioned with the smaller affiliates, they're under the same regulations that FACE is under. They are still regulated by the same federal organization, the OCC, but obviously have a much harder time complying. That's where the holding company really helps out, is we help them through that process. So every 18 months, our smaller banks, well, all of our banks are going through a regulatory review process, and the holding company is very involved in that process to help them through it, to provide information as required by the regulator, and to just make sure they are protected and document that for them. So regulations, they certainly help to the degree that they help you focus attention on things. The biggest challenge we have is getting regulators to appreciate the size and complexity of our organization. Because of our size and complexity, there are certain things that we do and do not do because they don't make sense for us. We're not going to invest half of our budget in information security because that just doesn't make, business sense. We invest a good amount of money. We do what is right and appropriate based on our risk profile, based on what we see, and based on what we can do to protect our customers. And our regulators have been, in general, very happy with what we do in that regard. There are compliance frameworks that we follow. We used to follow the FMHC CAT, which is not very tired, but we were within that scope of that framework. We were considered the evolving category, which is very good for our size. We're now looking at the Cyber Risk Institute cyber risk profile and aligning with that, which is NIST-based. So we are doing all we can to align with those. So again, for our size and complexity, with the tools we have and the staff we have, we actually do a pretty good job of protecting our customers and our employees.
Security teams are stretched thin everywhere.
Yeah.
How do you manage to balance all the different aspects needed to maintain effective security with limited resources?
Mostly, obviously, it revolves around communicating expectations to senior management about what we can and cannot do, but also staying in constant communication, with my analysts to make sure they're not getting burned out, to make sure they're getting the resources they need. My job as a manager and a senior leader is to channel resources down to those who need it, but also manage expectations from our senior leaders. We have a strong communication process with them. I report to the risk committee meetings on a regular basis, so I'm well known by the board, and we've set a good cadence of this is what we're doing on a regular basis. This is the kind of reporting that you would expect. Our boards receive a quarterly information security update report, which covers all of the controls that have been in place, all of the risks we face, any particular events over the previous quarter, as well as other ongoing, monthly reports. A lot of people in management and IT even receive weekly security reports from us that are prepared by my analysts. So a big part of that is just setting a good cadence of communication so people know what you're doing, what to expect, and what you're involved in.
A lot of the things that we're hearing about right now that customers, specifically in our MXDR space, are dealing with is alert fatigue, or in some cases, alert blindness. How do you guys cut through the noise to make sure that your team's focusing on real threats and not just chasing false alarms?
Sure. That's an excellent point. And those are actually, to a certain degree, related but different risks. Alert blindness is, not knowing what you don't know. And obviously, alert fatigue is trying to separate the signal from the noise. So obviously, we use Gradient, a large part for that. Gradient does take in all the alerts from our Active Directory, from our firewalls, from our endpoint solutions, and is able to correlate those for us and help us focus, primarily on the high-risk events. We have other systems too that we use for that as well, that really, if you need to get a system in place that, one, has visibility into everything you possibly can, but also has the intelligence to be able to determine, what's normal activity, to establish a baseline and say, okay, this is normal for this endpoint, this user for this time of day, versus this is something unusual. And those unusual things can be things like impossible travel, logins after hours, accessing files they've never accessed before. All those sorts of things that require investigation. But employee clocking in after lunch, that doesn't require investigation. That's normal.
Security isn't just an IT problem, it's a
It is
business
not.
problem. How do you guys get leadership in the board to buy into security investments?
Fortunately, our leadership is actually fairly well brought in because they realize it's a risk. I mean, if they didn't realize it, the regulators will make sure they understand that it's a risk. So they understand that cybersecurity is a risk not only for financial but reputation and even operational risk. So they fully appreciate that. But again, we also all appreciate that we can't destroy the company to save cybersecurity. We still have a budget we need to meet. We still have obligations we need to do. So they appreciate that support that we do. We have to get creative sometimes in how we do things. So obviously we look for ways to spend money and manage contracts and figure out what is nice to have versus what we need to have and just find those balances. So a lot of it, really, again, for our management is just focusing on what we can do. What are our true risks? So a big part of that is doing a risk assessment and say, what's a realistic risk that we face on an ongoing basis? Just like you would for your house or anything else. Our main headquarters may not have flood insurance because it's not in a flood zone. We don't worry about hurricanes in Cleveland, Ohio, generally speaking. So you figure out what risks are realistic for you, what are the investments you need to make to protect against those risks. You're not going to mitigate them all. You're not going to control them all, but you'll take reasonable steps to put either protections against them or ways to recover in case you have a risk. And really that's a big part of it because you can only protect so much. You need to make sure you have good recovery processes to get that data back, to get your systems back up and running in the event, be it natural, man-made, or even cyber.
So for companies that really don't have established processes, looking back on your experience, what is one thing you've learned about securing a financial services company that you wish you knew earlier?
A big part of any organization, obviously, is figuring out what is the most important organization, where are the crown jewels, what is it that the organization needs to run on a day-to-day basis. A big part of that is just being in regular communication with managers, learning what their pain points are, learning what that is important to them. A very educational part of that process that's tied to disaster recovery is doing what's called a business impact analysis. And in that, you work with the department manager and say, okay, if we have a catastrophic event tomorrow and we have to recover systems, what to you is the most critical thing to recover first? What do you need to do to keep your department running? And beyond that, from senior management, all right, what are the departments we need to have back up first to be able to serve our customers or provide the services that we provide? Once you understand, what is the key hierarchical structure to getting things back on for your business, you're able to identify what are the most important things we need to protect. What are our crown jewels? And then you can focus again on the needs to have rather than the nice to have. There are all sorts of things out there that are nice and bright and shiny that we could invest money in, but not all of them will help us protect the organization or our customers or our customer data in the same way.
If you had to give one piece of advice to another CISO or an IT leader trying to improve their cybersecurity capabilities on a tight budget, what would it be?
I would say the most important thing you can do as a leader, and this really won't cost you anything, is to make sure you maintain open communications with all of your employees and make sure you build up an environment and I won't say reputation, but basically that your employees feel like they can trust you. So that when your employees report something, you are thanking them for that. You're not making them feel stupid. You're not, mocking them in any way. You don't get any sort of reputation of looking down on your employees. So you just make employees understand, appreciate that they are really your eyes and ears to what's going on, and you need them if you really do. And so you want to make sure that you get your employees comfortable with reporting things to you, with sharing their concerns, with asking you questions, because that would give you insight into what's going on from a threat standpoint, but also give you insight to what's important to the business. So I would start there. I'd also make sure that you earn the trust and respect of your senior management, your board and your CEOs, to make sure that they understand that you are there to both protect and support the business. That you understand there is a business need, that you are there to manage risk, and you are there to learn about the business and learn how to protect it. So really, I think the biggest part is, building up that reputation of someone who can be trusted, someone who can be respected, and someone who is approachable and is able to communicate with their employees. And again, also sharing information with employees. The training doesn't become, a once a year big drop thing and you're beating them with a stick with it, but it becomes something that you can help them learn as they go along.
Human error, like you mentioned, is one of the leading causes of breaches. Yeah. And it's not necessarily that they're malicious actors. It's that sometimes they just don't know, or these threat actors are just
They have a job to do.
Yeah, the threat actors are getting better and better too. You get an email
Yeah.
that can look exactly like a regular email you would expect to get. So
Yeah.
knowing that they can come to you with an open door and it's not a yellable or fireable offense to
Yeah.
make a mistake is huge. So what is next? Are there any emerging trends or threats that mid-market financial institutions should start preparing for now?
The obvious ones are certainly artificial intelligence. That is certainly going to be disruptive. That's quickly slipping away. There will be people whose jobs will be disrupted by AI. It's just going to be an unfortunate case situation. So we need to learn how to manage that, both as employers and managers, and even as users of it. And unfortunately, that's an area that's just changing so quickly. It's very hard to keep on top of what's going on with that. So most of your mid-sized banks, like us, are going to be trusting our vendors on, that they have the right tools we need and how to use it, and that they're not going to put our data at risk when we use them. So, kind of mentioning on that, certainly for any size company, but certainly for a mid-market company like us, vendor management is crucial. Finding the right vendors and managing those relationships. And they are relationships and not just buying a product. You're in this process together. So managing the relationships, make sure you have open communications, that you understand the capabilities of what your vendors can provide and they understand your needs. Because, we don't really have the benefit of being able to waste money on vendors. We need to make sure that if we buy something, we're getting all the value out of it we possibly can. There's no extra room in the budget for unused products. The other thing that we have to be concerned about, obviously the changing landscape of threats. The attackers are starting to really come after mid-market companies more, just because they're under the assumption that they'll be less protected than your main players. We don't have all the security controls in place of a Bank of America or a Chase or others, which is true to a point. We have a lot of them. So we are starting to see a little bit more focus from attackers on your smaller banks like us. Yes, an assumption that they're easier pickings in that regard. We need to start preparing, for other future threats. Quantum computing at some point. It itself is down the road, but we need to start preparing now from a, crypto vantage point from our certificates. Make sure that we're starting to encrypt things with post-quantum cryptography for the eventual day when it does become reliable and people start taking data they stored and decrypting it. The changing regulatory environment, obviously, as everyone knows, we just had an election a couple months ago, and the regulatory environment is changing drastically. What does that mean for mid-sized banks? Do we expect to see more regulation, less regulation, or is it just going to be more of the same but different? And obviously, another challenge banks will continue to have is finding the right personnel. Again, as a small company like that, we can't always compete with your major players on a standpoint of salary or benefits. We need to find other ways to be able to entice good employees, be it work-life balance, be it just the work environment itself. Like we're just attracted to the nature of working for a community organization that invests directly back in the area where they live.
Jon, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you joining us to share your insights. If people want to learn more about you or FMHC, where can they find you?
First, FMHC, they can go to just firstmutualholding.com. I'll spell it out like it is. Me, I'm on LinkedIn randomly. So I don't do a whole lot of social media, but I do go on there, try to keep up to date, but they can contact me through there.
Do you have any final thoughts for security teams out there trying to do more with less?
A lot of it, again, is just finding those partners within your organization. There are typically people, within any department who you can work with, who will be kind of your security cheerleader, someone who, may not necessarily be in IT, but certainly has appreciation for that. So partner with those people who are of kindred spirit in that regard. Look for ways to expand your reach. I'd also find other people within your local area. I'm part of an organization called Northeast Ohio Cyber Consortium, and there's other companies within our regional area that get together to share information. So look for good information sharing opportunities out there. Find good podcasts like this one. There's obviously lots of them out there you can listen to for cybersecurity information. So there's no shortage of ways to stay informed, and there's no shortage of ways to get information. And there's also no shortage of ways to get overloaded and burned out. So find other people in your area, in your field that you can meet with, share with, and just stay in contact with.
Completely agree. I think that the need for community and staying in touch with other professionals in your industry, it's super important. A lot of people I found try to kind of weather it on their own or stay in their own little zone, and there are so many others that could really use that outreach.
One person.
And that's it for Live, Laugh, Lock It Down on this episode of Beyond the Signal. Shout out to Jon Densmore for dropping the secrets on how to keep community banks secure while the rest of us are just trying to clear out our inboxes. If you liked what you heard, smash that subscribe button, leave us a review if you're feeling generous, and forward this to that one coworker who's definitely still using password 123. We'll catch you next time. Until then, live a little, laugh when you can, and for the love of cybersecurity, lock it down.